So there's been a few mainstream media interviews between Trump defenders and journalists trying to ask them about the Trump Colorado trial and Republican responses to it. And the thing that confuses me is there are really good legal arguments as to why Donald Trump should not be stricken off the Republican primary ballot. And I mean that legitimately. And simple arguments too. You don't even need to get into insurrection, because some people try to argue, well, actually the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment only applies to Congress people and stuff like that, or it doesn't apply to the president because it didn't explicitly state it. Seems kind of silly. I don't think that's going to hold up in court, but I'm not an expert, lawyer, so who knows? I think a simpler argument would be something like, hey, this is a primary ballot, and I've seen certain court judges say this in decisions in certain states. Hey, this is a primary ballot. We can talk about whether somebody who's a criminal or has committed a crime or has committed insurrection can be in the general, but a primary ballot is a party nomination process. The government has no business interfering in a private institution like a political party's nomination process. If the party wanted to nominate a dog, ultimately it's up to the party, but the dog just would not be able to win the general election. That would get them at least through the primary season. That's a simple argument you can make that I haven't seen a lot of lawyers reject, except for example, some of the judges in the Colorado court case and some of the people involved in the court case, I believe, in Maine. But instead, there's just a question of, well, this is anti-democratic to take him off the ballot and not he didn't commit a crime. I feel like a stronger argument, if you're making this from a legal standpoint, is he didn't commit a crime, not this is anti-democratic. Definitely when I've heard Republicans for the last 8 to 16 years, ever since I've had any involvement in politics or thought about politics in any way, say it's not a democracy, it's a republic. And so there's certain rules and guidelines we play by. For example, that felons can't be president of the United States, or, people who are non-citizens or otherwise, but whatever. Let's watch a few of these interviews and see how they defend against the Colorado court case backlash, as people are questioning whether Donald Trump should be the nominee if we don't even know he can be the nominee.
In other words, you think that when the Supreme Court takes this up, they are going to side with President Trump. Is that correct?
They are going to side against people being thrown off the ballot in this sort of manner. The brief that I will be filing with the United States Supreme Court is not going to say that President Trump was a bad person.
Now, let's be clear. This is the Missouri Secretary of State. So this isn't just like some random congressperson. The Secretary of State of Missouri's job is to manage things like elections. So when you listen to what he's about to say, take in mind that he was elected for the explicit purpose of managing Missouri's elections. Keep that in mind when he has this back and forth with the Republican over election law in Missouri. I mean, not with the Republican, with the reporter over election law in Missouri.
The brief that I will be filing with the United States Supreme Court is not going to say that President Trump was a bad person. It's not going to say that he's a good person. What it's going to say is that this extrajudicial means of removing people from the ballot is catastrophic to our country if it's allowed to continue. Because if Democrats can do it, you know that Republicans will do it. And if Republicans will do it, then Democrats will do it more.
To that point, Secretary, in order to remove President Biden from the ballot, according to your state constitution, you would need to go to court. What do you think would be your strongest argument?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Your state constitution actually states that the Secretary of State lacks authority to assess qualifications of a candidate to determine whether to place a candidate's name on a primary ballot. That's according to section 115.387 of your state constitution.
Sir, what I'm saying is, if the Supreme Court upholds the ruling out of Colorado, and what
which went to court to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot. So you, according to your state constitution, would need to go to court.
Sir, let's just be clear. First of all, you've already said you're not an attorney and you don't know what happened in Colorado. I
know what happened in Colorado, sir. What I said was that I didn't read through all of the evidence specifically to be able to qualify whether there was hearsay or not. To get back to my question, you said that you would decide to remove Joe Biden from the ballot in your state. According to your state constitution, which I just read to you from, it says you need to go to court. I'm asking you what you think your strongest argument is.
And I continue to try to answer your questions, and you continue to try to tell me stuff that just isn't true.
That's
and
not
here's
factual, sir. You made an accusation about me not knowing something. I'm trying to clarify it for you. You can choose to answer the question or just continue deflecting. What is the strongest argument you would make in court to remove Joe Biden from the ballot? Go.
Go. This is the problem, is there's a lot of tit for tat going on here, and threats of tit for tat. And if Donald Trump is taken off the ballot, the logic goes, then it's only fair that they go after Joe Biden to take him off the ballot. The problem is you would have to find some law or a thing that he did that would disqualify him from being president. For example, like what Donald Trump tried to do to prove that Obama couldn't be president because he wasn't born in the United States. He was born in Kenya, and he was asking for the birth certificate. That was the purpose of him trying to do that, was to disqualify him. And so this is kind of like a tit for tat, trying to find something to get Joe Biden for. But this is no longer a question about whether Donald Trump is going to, by the time all these court cases are over, be a felon or be eligible to vote. Eligible to run, or if he engaged in insurrection. This is no longer a conversation about that. It's now a conversation of, well, maybe that happened, or maybe there'll be some court decision and that'll be the way it goes. But if that's the case, then we're going to take out Joe Biden because it's only fair. But again, you would have to find a law that Joe Biden violated. You'd have to find something to convict him of being a felon. You'd have to take him to court. Again, like I said earlier, I have talked to Republicans for a very long time, and I always thought about the difference between democracy and the difference between a republic. And I never thought, when talking to everyday people, the difference here, when explaining it to people, mattered that much. But apparently, the Republicans were right and I was wrong, and now I need to turn it around and explain it back to them. The difference between a democracy and a republic is, a democracy, okay, a pure democracy is everyone just decides everything. But we're a republic, an elected republic, where we elect representatives. And as a republic, we have certain rules we have to abide by. And part of those rules is that felons cannot be president. Part of those rules is that when you're president of the United States, you cannot try to manipulate the system to make it so you win, and that your opponent loses, and that no matter what, even if you lose the electoral college vote, you can just manipulate the system. These are rules set in our republic. For example, the thing that Donald Trump tried to do in having Mike Pence overturn the election results on January 6th, that was something that was not within his authority. That would have been illegal for Mike Pence to do, which is why he did not do it, and he tried to go around it. The republic says these things are not allowed. Now, if you can find something like that for Joe Biden, then please hold him to account. There's nothing I want more than to have all the politicians terrified to commit white-collar or financial crimes, fraud, or try to usurp our democracy. I would love that. But I don't want the standard to be, our criminals can just commit crime as long as we keep your criminals as well as also out of prison. We'll keep our guys out of prison. We'll keep your guys out of prison. As long as you don't go after our guys, we don't go after your guys. Everybody stays out of prison. That seems like the worst case scenario, where we just waive the law to say, well, he's popular, therefore, since he wants to run for the highest office in the land, we'll ignore all the crimes. We'll ignore the $7.8 million from foreign entities, foreign businesses, the government of China, the government of Saudi Arabia. We'll ignore the classified documents mishandling. We'll ignore him lying to the National Archives to try to hide those documents. We'll ignore the sharing of secret and classified invasion plans that he knew was classified, people who did not have clearance. We'll ignore him writing up executive orders, his staff writing up executive orders to overturn the election by seizing voting machines. We'll ignore all of that because he's popular and people want to vote for him. Okay, then all those people who were saying for years that they wanted a republic, not a pure democracy, they were fucking liars. That's what it feels like to me. Anyway, moving on to the next example of a Trump supporter, Colorado back and forth. Again, there's real arguments they could be making here that are, almost surefire winners that are going to be talked about on the Supreme Court level. The Supreme Court is going to discuss the fact that it's a Republican primary. I think that's going to be something that at least leads some of them to throw it out or try to say, nah, I'm voting against it. There's no way this is okay. And again, none of them makes that argument. I think the problem is, though, even that's the most surefire way of success, it doesn't solve the problem of Trump having committed crimes and possibly not being eligible. All that does is kick the can down the road. So, I understand why they're not going for it, but I still think at the moment, at the very least, give them at least time to, delay it, at least delay the questions. Now, here is an example of a Republican from New York, Alessi Stefanik, who's the 4th most powerful Republican in the House, if you trust the official ranking system. She is 4th in line, and she's going back and forth with Kristen Welker of Meet the Press over Colorado disqualifying Donald Trump and the case going to Supreme Court.
Would you vote to certify, and will you vote to certify the results of the 2024 election, no matter what they show?
Well, I voted not to certify the state of Pennsylvania because, as we saw in Pennsylvania and other states across the country, that there was unconstitutional acts circumventing the state legislature and unilaterally changing election law.
What about 2024?
Okay, can I just throw this out there quick? This is just this is a lie in a weird way, because Donald Trump, at any point when you look at any of these state laws or any of these, regulations that are put in place, he could have challenged them in court. But all the stuff that is being objected to after the fact. After the election is done, you want to change the rules in the specific states where Trump lost. Trump is not objecting to the rules in states like Texas. Trump is after the fact. He's not objecting to the rules in states like Florida. He's objecting to the rules in states that he lost. After the fact, after he lost. Do you think if Donald Trump won in Pennsylvania, he'll be talking about how bad the election laws was there and how it was unconstitutional and therefore it was rigged because of the rules that were set by the local election officials instead of the federal government? If it was reversed and we had a situation where Donald Trump won and Joe Biden was like, well, actually, it was rigged against me because of these problems with Pennsylvania election law. Couldn't this mean no matter who won the 2020 election, they could then make the argument that the election was rigged against them in advance because they were just unhappy with how certain laws were after the fact, once those laws did not end up benefiting them? I just, it seems a little slippery. It seems a little slippery.
What about 2024?
We will see if this is a legal and valid election. What we're seeing.
And by the way, I'm saying that also knowing that Donald Trump did challenge multiple states on their election law, sometimes winning, sometimes losing. So it's not like they didn't attempt to do this. They went through the proper processes. They were pretty, I don't want to say thorough about it, but they did go through the processes. So again, it was available to them.
We will see if this is a legal and valid election. What we're seeing so far is that Democrats are so desperate, they're trying to remove President Trump from the ballot. That is a suppression of the American people, and the Supreme Court is taking that case up in February. That should be a 9-0 to allow President Trump to appear on the ballot, because that's the American people's decision to make this November.
That's not how the law works. Well, it's the American people's decision to make. Okay, then if that's the case, could we have, I don't know, can I run for president even though I'm not 35? Because it's the American people's decision to make. If it's the American people's decision to make, does that mean we could have somebody, I don't know, Pablo, the refugee from Honduras, could he run for president as a non-citizen? Could, I don't know, could we get the Queen to run for? It's the American people's decision to make. There are certain rules that we abide by in the political system, that certain people are not eligible to run for president. One of those groups of people who is also not eligible to vote in most states for federal elections is felons. And so if Trump is convicted as a felon, then whether or not that's the American people's decision to make, that we have certain rules we abide by. And if Donald Trump did engage in a crime of insurrection, which the Supreme Court will decide, they'll probably vote that he's able to participate in the Republican primary for reasons I've already stated. That is the court's decision to make. Because again, I can't believe I have to want to make this distinction. And in most instances, this distinction does not matter that much. But in this case, I guess it does. And I have to be the one to bring it up to Republicans. We do live distinctly in a republic, not a pure democracy. And that republic comes with rules.
The matter is, of course, halted pending that appeal, as you say. But just to be very clear, I don't hear you committed to certifying the election results. Will you only commit to certify the results if
they're
President Trump wins?
Until Trump gives her the thumbs up, she can't do anything.
That means former President Trump wins?
It means if they are constitutional. What we saw in 2020 was unconstitutional circumventing of the Constitution, not going through state legislatures when it comes.
Using the standard that they're using, they could have said every election was rigged because there were state laws like the ones they were talking about, and problems with state law when it comes to election, and like in every single election, this type of stuff they're talking about happens. They're objecting to it after the fact, not before the fact, because they lost.
Comes to changing election law. And we're seeing this in my home state of New York, Kristen. We are seeing Democrats try to steal the election and illegally gerrymander congressional districts that.
There was a congressional, the New York one that she's talking about. There was a proposed district proposed in 2022. It was rejected by the courts as, not representative. And then it was thrown to, I think, an independent redistricting commission, which failed to produce a map. And then they had the election, the Republicans won in New York, and now I think by January 18th or sometime next month, there's supposed to be another map proposed by an independent redistricting commission, and that's what now is being talked about as gerrymandering, because the decision that comes back from the independent redistricting commission might not benefit the Republicans, and it is expected in some circles to end up producing a map that could lead to Democrats taking back House seats in New York, which then could lead to Democrats taking back the Congress. And so that's why they're concentrating on this.
That we fairly won and are fair line. So
Oh, and she's like a Republican from I think the 14th district. Oh my gosh, did I get that right? It'd be dope if I got that right. 14th, 21st. Ah, not even close.
See this at a very local level, as well as the unconstitutional overreach we saw at the national level in 2020.
I want to move on to the university presidents, but just to put a fine point on this, Mr. Trump, his allies did take their case, their concerns about the election to court more than 60 times. They lost every time. Mr. Trump hired 2 independent firms to investigate that. They came up short, as well as the federal agency.
Yeah, but those were Democrat firms. Those were Democrat firms, obviously.
Responsible for overseeing election security, CISA said that
all those judges, including the ones appointed by Trump, were working for Biden.
The 2020 election was the most secure in American history. But let's move on to the university
Well, let me make
presidents.
a final point, and I think it's important.
Most secure and rigging the vote, if you mean it that way.
Because the American people understand that it was not a fair election. We had unconstitutional
Dude, I love it when politicians speak on behalf of the American people. It's great. I went and I talked to Mr. America, and he told me that Trump should have won.
And that was why I objected to certain states when it came to my constitutional responsibility as a member of Congress. I'm going to always stand up for the.
I wish we attached shock collars to politicians, and anytime they spoke on behalf of the American people, the shock collar immediately checks polling data to see if the majority of Americans actually believe that. And if they don't, they get like 5 volts. And every single time they do it, the voltage increases.
Constitution and make sure that we have strong election integrity. And the real threat to democracy is Joe Biden and Democrats who are attempting to remove President Trump from the ballot because Joe Biden knows he can't win at the ballot box.
Again, there's no evidence of coordination between Biden and DOJ. But let's talk about the university presidents, because
the university presidents, Dr. Gay resigned. Do you think it was because her name was gay? Okay, anyway, moving on.